Welcome to Free Thought Matters. I'm Annie Laurie Gaylor.
And I'm Dan Barker. Annie Laurie and I are co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces Free Thought Matters, a weekly talk show from the perspective of freethinkers, atheists, agnostics, and other skeptics.
We invite you to join FFRF, which works as a state church watchdog and is the nation's largest association of freethinkers. Sign up at our website, ffrf.org, or ask for a sample copy of our newspaper, Free Thought Today.
Amber Scorah recently spoke at FFRF's National Convention about her moving and insightful memoir, Leaving the Witness, Exiting a Religion and Finding a Life, which describes her experiences growing up in the Jehovah's Witnesses' faith and then leaving it all behind. I had the pleasure of sitting down with Amber for a few moments after her talk. So Amber Scorah, what a pleasure to have you here on Free Thought Matters.
Thank you for having me.
So I loved your book, Leaving the Witness, which is Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yes.
And you were one of those people that was banging on my door on Saturday mornings, right?
Yes, I did it for many, many years.
As a little girl, even?
Yeah, as I grew older, I did it. And then as we grew up, I started to do it more and more. And we're encouraged to become what we called regular pioneers. So at one point, I was doing around 70 hours a month of preaching.
Wow, 70 hours. Didn't you have to fill out a card every week or something?
Yeah, once a month, we would report how much time we had put in. And if you didn't put in the report, it was basically a means of making sure that you were regular in your preaching, because that's kind of one of the most important activities of Jehovah's Witnesses is their preaching.
So when you came to my door, to the door of some of these viewers,
Yeah.
were you like sincerely hoping to convert my soul, or were you just racking up the hours so that you could show that you did the job?
I mean, it was a little of both, because I did really believe I had the truth. And so I did have this genuine feeling that I wanted to save people. But, you know, you do get a little like bitter after a while, because as you know, most people don't talk to witnesses. So you spend a lot of time wasting time. And so sometimes you do get a little hardened and kind of feel like, what's the point anyways, all these smug people in their houses. But even so, it didn't matter if no one listened, because to us, you know, it was a demonstration of our faith to go out and try to proselytize.
Yeah.
And even if no one listened, that didn't matter.
Well, I would sometimes invite you people in, and one of you was telling me that John 1:1 was mistranslated, you know. In the beginning was a God. You probably know that whole thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So I said, oh, you know the Greek? And they said, yeah. So I gave him my Greek New Testament. I
Yeah.
said, show it to me. And he didn't know. He couldn't read.
No.
He said, oh, I think God is that line with the circle with a line in it. They didn't know anything. They just were, you know, recycling.
Yeah. Well, one of the fascinating things is that around the time when I started to have some doubts about the faith and whether it was the truth that I had been taught, there was an article that came out from the leaders in Brooklyn, and it was talking about this very thing, that some brothers and sisters had started to want to learn Greek and Hebrew, the Bible languages, so that they could read the scriptures in that language, and they were being strongly admonished not to do this, because I think the thing is that in a group like this, it's very important that the leadership who controls the messaging, you know, can control basically what people, how they're interpreting it. And so if you learn the language, it gives you a little bit too much room for your own interpretation,
for
or for
your own.
seeing errors, as you say.
Or you might learn that the word Jehovah actually doesn't appear anywhere in the scripture. That was just a made-up word.
Yeah, I learned of all these things after I left. There's a lot of things, because as a Jehovah's Witness, we were only allowed to really read Jehovah's Witnesses publications. If anything was critical of the witnesses or was from an external scholar, we were told not to read that because it wasn't from, you know, the godly channel.
And I noticed that the articles in the Awake and the Watchtower, your publications, don't even attribute the scholars. There's just no name on it. You can't look up what they've written or what, you know, it's just they're just these nameless articles that are written.
Yeah, it didn't seem strange to me at the time because I was so used to that, and we thought of it as like, oh, well, no one's going to take credit. They're trying to be humble. But now looking back, I'm like, oh, that's a little strange, because you don't know the credentials of the person, or a lot of times where they got this information.
And you can't check up on their reliability or credit.
Yeah.
It's just, you know.
Yeah.
So you were born and raised in it and believed it, and you had the fear of heaven and hell and Armageddon and all that stuff. And you didn't celebrate birthdays. What are some of the things that Jehovah's Witnesses do or don't do? I mean, being raised in that environment.
Yeah, well, like on a practical level, on a life level, being raised a Jehovah's Witness as a kid, it means that you didn't participate in a lot of things that other people do. Because in a group like this, it's really helpful and it works well to keep people in, to create this separation between the people on the inside who have the truth and then the others out there. So there were some certain things that Jehovah's Witnesses picked out of the Bible many years ago, like that birthdays should not be celebrated and that Christmas is not, really Jesus' birthday and it's pagan, so we shouldn't do that. And so they picked out a number of different arbitrary things from the Bible and made them their doctrine, one of which is well known as the no blood transfusion. So even if your life is in danger, you still refuse blood. That was just based on a scripture they pulled out of Leviticus, I think. So there's that side of it, but also there's the side of the Jehovah's Witnesses that a lot of people don't realize, and that they are an apocalyptic religion. And so they believe we're living in the last days and that Armageddon is going to come any day now. To give an illustration of that, my mother was told that she would never go to high school, and my mom is now in her 70s. They thought that Armageddon was so imminent.
Well, you must have thought the same thing.
I did, and that's why this kind of viewpoint, this apocalyptic viewpoint, is a backdrop to your life, and it informs almost everything that you do when you think the world is ending. So, for example, that was why we would preach all these hours every month. We were told not to go to college, not to establish any kind of career beyond just like a part-time job that would pay our bills. And this was because they really believed that the world is ending, and that why would you spend your time doing anything, investing in this world, when this world's about to be destroyed?
So if you heard like an explosion or a thunder or a loud noise, you might think maybe...
Yeah.
Wow.
And all throughout history, looking back now, I remember growing up, it was the 80s, there was the Cold War. All through history, there's these things that happen that are kind of scary, and you can always attribute it to being...
It's the sign.
It's the sign. And so, growing up, it was maybe the Cold War, and then later it was, I don't know, the ozone layer, and now it's, different things. But the world is a scary place, and there's a way that I think that, a group like this can use fear to keep people believing that this is all a sign of something that is pointing to their truth that they've revealed.
Now you're a non-believer, and so it involves China. So what happened? Tell us what happened briefly here.
Yeah, so I was preaching many hours a month in my home territory, which was Vancouver, Canada. And as we spoke about, you don't get much response when you're preaching as a Jehovah's Witness in the Western world.
I wonder why.
But when you think of a territory like China, which obviously most religions are illegal in China and Jehovah's Witnesses have not become established there, if you take this message to China, no one knows anything about you. They don't know that, in the West you're viewed as sort of something that people kind of laugh and close their doors at. And in China, there's like a real hunger and there's an interest in something that was so forbidden for so long, which is religion and the Bible. So I decided to learn Mandarin and move to China to be a missionary. And I did that. And after a few years learning the language, getting more fluent, getting more immersed in the culture. When you go to China, though, as a Jehovah's Witness, because the religion is illegal, you have to do all of your preaching underground. And so this was a very curious situation for me as a Jehovah's Witness, because a Jehovah's Witness in any other part of the world, your life revolves around the religion and you're very busy and there's multiple meetings a week and study and association. In China, all of that was gone. And so it had the effect of giving me a little bit of freedom for the first time in my life, which I always say is very funny because most people who go to China do not feel more free.
That says something about Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, it probably was the first sign something was up. But it did open some space for me just to have this physical space from the community, but also a mental space from all of this constant indoctrination and sort of self-affirming association. Everyone believed the same thing that I believed.
Are Jehovah's Witness missionaries supported by the church, or did you have to work to support yourself?
There's different kinds of missionaries. I use the word missionary because it's the most readily understandable by people, but I was not the kind of missionary where they supported me. I had a part-time job that would pay my wages to live, and then the rest of the time I preached. So yeah, being in China was a totally new experience as a witness. I loved it because it was kind of an adventure. And, as a woman in the church, women are not allowed to hold positions or give talks or do anything that, mostly men get to do. But preaching was the one thing that a woman could do and was encouraged to do. So for me, it felt like this really adventurous thing to go on to this foreign country. And when I believed this religion to be true, it was a really fulfilling, happy time for a while. But then what happened was that there were some byproducts of this space I had for my community. One of them was that at home, when we preached to people, it was a very formal affair. And we didn't make friends with people that we preached to, or any worldly people for that matter. But in China, because we had to do the work underground, that what we did was we first made friends with people before we preached to them, because we had to make sure they were safe, that they weren't Communist Party members.
Yeah, and you weren't going to be outed or something.
So what happened was that not only did I have some space for my community, I also had started to make friends with people who were not Jehovah's Witnesses, who had different thinking, had a different culture, speaking in a different language, which also almost kind of like turned my mind upside down in some ways. And over time, this started to make me just think in different ways that I hadn't thought before.
And you write in your book that when you had to say these Jehovah's Witness phrases in another language, it made you consider them for the first time almost, like what you're actually saying. You wrote something about that.
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, you're speaking in this language, Chinese, which is so different from English. There's just no overlap. And so you almost, I think, use a different part of your brain when you're speaking another language. And these things that I was teaching were things that were just like rote for me. They were things that I could recite in my sleep because I had preached them my whole life. And now here I was sitting across from people who just sometimes would look at me like, are you serious? Because it sounded so foreign and crazy to them. And it was as if I could hear it for the first time through their ears now, in this weird cultural disorientation that I had. And also I started to get feelings that I hadn't had before. For example, I would start to feel a little like embarrassed or ashamed as I talked to them, because my students were often teaching me things from their thousands of years of cultural history that were, very wise and very insightful. But I was sitting across from them telling them as the teacher that they needed to throw all of that away in favor of this 100-year-old new American religion that I was bringing them. I was a foreigner who had traveled to their country to tell them to do this, and it just started to feel really wrong and arrogant even.
Did some of them do it?
I did convert 2 people to Jehovah's Witnesses, and as far as I know, they're still Jehovah's Witnesses.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we're talking with Amber Scorah, author of the book Leaving the Witness. What is the subtitle? And finding?
Exiting a Religion and Finding a Life.
Exiting a Religion and Finding a Life. Stay tuned for more Free Thought Matters.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist, and I'm alarmed by the intrusions of religion into our secular government. That's why I'm asking you to support the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics, working to keep state and church separate, just like our founding fathers intended. Please support the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
Thank you for watching Free Thought Matters. You can find more content by the Freedom from Religion Foundation at our website, ffrf.org. Follow FFRF on Facebook, and you'll get notifications about all of our content, including whenever we go live on FFRF's Ask an Atheist. FFRF is also on YouTube, where all of our programs, including this show and our weekly news bites, are available to watch anytime. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the web.
And welcome back to Free Thought Matters. I'm Dan Barker, co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And this past fall at our 42nd annual convention, Amber Scorah, author of the book Leaving the Witness, gave a riveting talk about her experience of leaving a cult and finding a new life. Let's listen to just a little bit of that talk.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the inside scoop on cults. So here's the thing. No one who is in a cult ever thinks they're in a cult. You think you're living your best life, and I have to say that in some ways, it is a great life. I mean, you having the answers to all of life's disturbing questions is really relaxing. you have no angst, you don't worry about climate change, you don't have to have a retirement fund, the world is ending. Armageddon, God is going to solve all of those problems.
What advice would you give to me or somebody? What should we say to someone like you, who you used to be, when we come to the door? Is there anything we can say, or should we just shut the door?
Be kind.
Be kind.
I've been there. No, but the fact of the matter is that you're probably not going to unconvince a witness in that format when they've come to proselytize. But I think that, for me, what it took was being ready to see the truth about my religion, and that can take a long time and be a process, because for a witness it's very scary to question their faith because there's so much at stake. They shun people who leave, family, doesn't matter, friends, overnight. They call you an apostate. So, if you were to come, say it was you, and you said, have you ever thought about the blood issue and how that doesn't really add up? Maybe they would have some canned remarks that they had practiced to refute that argument. But if someone like me they encountered, or you showed them my book, they would immediately be like, oh, no, we cannot take that, because they've been taught that anything written by someone who leaves is subversive and from Satan and designed to destroy their faith. And they call it lies. They call it apostate lies, even though it's all true.
So I shouldn't argue with them? I should just
I don't know.
smile?
I enjoyed a good argument when I was a witness,
Yeah,
but then look
okay.
at me now.
So you write that worse than murder, worse than theft, being an apostate is like, what, the highest sin, or the highest?
Yeah, it's the one sin that God will not forgive.
Leaving the faith.
Yeah.
So you've committed the unpardonable sin here.
Yeah, it was hard to get there and to embody that, because they also call people who leave all kinds of really negative things, like mentally diseased, and that they're dogs that have returned to their vomit. They really dehumanize apostates, such that I think it's the only way that they can get people who love someone to shun them. You have to dehumanize them, and therefore you can cut them off. So it's a tried and true mechanism people use, and it works.
In a lot of cults, it works the same way.
Yeah.
And you said at the time you didn't think it was a cult. You just thought you had the truth. And
Yeah,
there were all these other cults out there, but not you, right?
That's right. Anyone who's in a cult or a high control religion, whatever you want to call it, never thinks they are, because you're too surrounded by it. You don't have any perspective. It's only when you start to step out of the conformity, and then you see all these consequences that start to come that feel really, really wrong. That's when it's easier to wake up, actually.
So you came back from China, changed in some way. You realized that your religious views weren't the only in the world, and you had to broaden your perspective, and eventually came to the place where you rejected that religion. Did you reject all religion, all faith, or did you hold on to something for a while?
It was strange, because at first when I left, I didn't not believe all of it. It takes a long time to unravel everything. So I was like, okay, they're definitely wrong about some things, but maybe this other stuff is still right. So I embarked on this project of doing research, which I had never done.
You weren't supposed to do that.
Yeah, reading books outside of my religious texts. And it didn't take long before it all started to crumble. And I realized that though everything seemed to add up in their doctrine, the very foundation of it was rotten, and therefore it didn't matter how much it all seemed logical and made sense the way they explained everything about the world. So after that, I felt really deceived, I think. I think I felt just so turned off of religion that I just couldn't join any other religion. But it's a strange thing, because from a very small child, I always had a kind of spiritual nature. So I couldn't turn that off. I just came to a point where I still believed there was so much beauty and love, that there had to be something that made all of this possible. But I no longer thought of it at all in the terms that I had been taught, in these traditional terms of Christianity or anything. I just started to believe that, look, there's things that we can't understand. There's things in this world that are magical, and maybe we just have to accept that. And maybe we have to double down, be here in the present, and realize that, maybe this life is all we have. And that really shifted everything for me.
I went through that whole process too. The natural beauty and awe and wonder of the world is enough. So what did you do? You announced to your family, hey, I'm an apostate now. And then what happened? I mean, you're supposed to be shunned. Were you shunned, and were you?
Yeah, it was sort of a thing that happened in phases because I was in another country and I was already very cut off from a lot of people. But the first people who knew that I was having doubts were the people that there were other Jehovah's Witnesses in China, those friends. They cut me off. You know, I have family members. I have a couple family members who aren't witnesses, thankfully, like 2 or 3, that didn't shun me, obviously. But everyone that was a Jehovah's Witness eventually, one by one, cut me off.
Your parents and siblings?
Yeah.
And
My father already passed away, but yeah, my one brother never got baptized. He never became a witness, so he still talks to me, but my sister does not.
Wow, that must be horrible. She's your sister, right?
It is horrible. And for me, another thing that was really hard, which you don't think about, was the way that if you have friendships from when you're, you know, younger, you have this shared history with people. And you have that with family, but you also have that with people that are just in your life that you met along the way. And there's some depth to that kind of relationship that when it's all gone, and I was already in my 30s when I left, and you have to start over, there was this feeling of being like unrooted that was really hard. I didn't feel like I had history with anyone. I met nice people, but it takes time to feel close and to develop relationships with people.
And on top of all that, they are considering you to be Satan. I mean, they're considering you to be this horrible, bad person. And you know that's not true, but you know that's what they think about you.
It's a strange situation to be in because I myself didn't feel, to my surprise, that I had changed that much. Like, I thought that being an apostate, I would just walk around being like evil. I don't know. But I didn't feel like I was that different of a person.
You didn't want to start murdering and raping and stealing?
No, it's just a boring kind of bookworm. But it was a strange feeling to know that people that I loved looked down on me so much.
Now, we don't have much time left, so we can't do justice to it, but you do write in your book about the loss of your child later. And when there's a death in the family, when you're religious, you have this sort of repertoire of things you can call on. But as a non-religious person facing such a tragedy in your life, was it harder or was it easier to deal with that horrible tragedy?
I think one thing I've noticed, because I've met other parents who have lost children, is that even for people who are religious, the loss of a child is the one kind of loss that is, honestly, even religion doesn't really help people. It's just too devastating.
But you can pretend that you're going to see them again.
And that's a big thing, yeah. And so I had lost my father when I was a witness, which is different than losing a child, but it's still a traumatic event, and I was quite young. But I remember how it felt because I was religious then, and Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in hell and heaven per se. They believe in that Armageddon, after Armageddon, there'll be a paradise earth, and dead ones would be resurrected there. So with my dad, I was sad, but I wasn't that sad because we were told Armageddon's coming like tomorrow, every day.
And you'll see him again.
So I'm like, it's like a matter of who knows, I'll see him very soon.
So keep waiting. Right?
Yeah, exactly. But then, of course, the years start to add up. So that experience of death is completely different than the experience of death that is just feeling like there's nothing. And so I think what, for me, it caused, obviously it was devastating and difficult, but it did make it that there was no escape from it. And so there was something different about experiencing emotions and having to face them rather than like trying to like run away from them by propping yourself up with beliefs or, you know, platitudes. And ultimately I had to grow and like learn how to be a person who could walk around and carry this grief with me through life. And there's different ways of doing that when you have a child. No one wants to be in this situation, but there's ways that you can, one thing I found really comforting was looking at science. In the last few years, but there's been research that shows that when a mother is pregnant with her child, there's cells like DNA from the baby's body breaks off and ends up in the mother's bloodstream or body, and for the rest of her life. So there was ways I could still think of my son being with me, or there was the experience of the love I had with him, that a mother and child's love, it feels transcendent, it feels eternal. There was ways of trying to frame it in my mind where the loss wasn't as devastating, but where I also didn't feel like I was deluding myself.
But you didn't have to pretend. You write that you were not necessarily free, but you had to face the full pain for what it was without any pretense, and and not pretend and not sugarcoat it, and ignore how horrible it was. Well,
and I think it adds to it's not something I wish that I had to deal with, but I think it adds somehow to the depth of your character. And I remember reading someone saying once that encountering great grief like this is almost a test of character. And I do, after leaving my religion, it was funny because I didn't want to just go out, as you say, and become like an immoral, terrible person. Like, I still wanted to be a good person with good character, and that was always been very important to me. And I found, to my surprise, that in this grief, you had to find a way to not devolve into like anger and bitterness, because that would just consume the rest of your life. You know, your life becomes very precious when you've faced a death like this. So I had to find ways to try to still, you know, live and experience joy. I had a daughter after my son died. I wanted to be a good mother to her. Through all these means, I found ways of living with this tragedy.
It seems paradoxical that the fact that life is going to end, sometimes way too early, actually enhances the preciousness of it. Because we give more value to things that are precious and short, and then if life's eternal, then life is cheap, really. But the fact that we live as biological organisms in a natural environment and face them for what they are.
Yeah.
What a moving story. Well, I hope your story helps other people too, because we all go through something like that.
Yeah.
So thank you, Amber Scorah, for writing the book,
having me.
Leaving the Witness, Exiting a Religion and
Finding a Life.
And Finding a Life. Well, welcome to life. So.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
And thank you for watching Free Thought Matters, because free thought matters.
Hi, I'm Steve Pinker. In my book, Enlightenment Now, I show that the world has become a better place as reason has been overcoming superstition and tribalism. But the values of the Enlightenment are under attack. That's why I'm a proud member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest association of free thinkers working to keep state and church separate. Please join me in supporting the Freedom from Religion Foundation to ensure that our government is driven not by religion, but by reason.